Hey, welcome to Newsmakers, a co-production of the Epoch Times and NTD. I'm your host, Joshua Phillip. Now, in a developing story, aides to President Joe Biden have allegedly discovered a new batch of classified documents. That's in an office that Biden had used when he was vice president under Obama. Now, this is according to NBC News, which cited an anonymous source, and so far, the White House and Justice Department aren't commenting. This follows reports from earlier in the week of another classified cache of documents from Biden's days as vice president that have erupted into a scandal. It shows that Republicans say, again, going after Biden on this, is not just hypocrisy, but also a potential crime, and also of a two-tier justice system under a politicized Justice Department. Now, some of you might remember the FBI raid on former President Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago in August of 2022, and Trump was alleged to have illegally taken classified documents to his home when he was president. Now, this led to rumors that Trump may be arrested, potentially face jail time, and even render Trump unable to hold political office ever again. Some allege that Trump's possession of the classified documents violated Section 2071 of Title 18 in the U.S. Code. Now, that law states anyone who willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, or destroys any record, proceeding, map, book, paper, document, or other thing filed or deposited in any public office could be fined or go to prison for up to 3 years. That crime could also render a person ineligible to hold public office. Yet Trump and others were quick to point out something important, that as former president, Trump had broad powers to declassify documents. The debate now is on whether, Trump declassified the documents in his possession and whether any laws were actually violated. The problem for Biden's a little different, though. Biden is facing a similar problem, but it's fundamentally different. Biden was not president at the time that he allegedly took classified documents, and the alleged violations of U.S. law he faces does not fall under the protections that Trump allegedly has. This is now raising some eyebrows as Americans look to the Department of Justice and wonder this: will they treat Biden equally if he was allegedly violating the crime that Trump was accused of? It is being regarded by some as a bellwether, showing the American public if the case against Trump was really about an alleged crime or whether it was really just about politics. Now, meanwhile, Republicans are already launching an investigation. Representative James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, announced the probe on Tuesday. He's demanding the White House counsel's office and the National Archives turn over information about, quote, Biden's failure to return highly classified records from his time as vice president. And this includes the classified documents themselves. To find out more, I spoke with Congressman Andrew Clyde, and while the new Congress's House committees have yet to be announced, Congressman Clyde has been sitting on the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Hey, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be on this afternoon. Thank you.
Now, you're a House Committee Oversight member. We recently learned that U.S. intelligence materials related to Ukraine, Iran, and allegedly the UK were found in President Biden's private office. These documents were from when he was vice president under Obama, and the Oversight Committee is investigating. What do you want to find out with this?
Well, I think there's a number of things that we need to find out. We have to determine what messaging went back and forth, what communication went back and forth between NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, and the Biden administration and the Department of Justice. We have to know when these documents were really found. Were they found on the 2nd of November, or did they find them earlier than that? When did they know it? What did they know? And how long have these documents been there? Remember, having classified documents as a vice president or a former vice president is very different than having documents as a president, because the president has the power to declassify documents. The vice president does not have the power to declassify documents. So there's a big difference here. The news media says, oh, President Biden, nothing to see here. There's a lot to see here, and we're going to find out everything that needs to be found out so there's complete transparency.
Great. I want to get more into that in a sec, but I know the documents are found in Biden's office are classified, but can you give us some idea of what these were? Do we have any idea?
Well, we know that they were special compartmented information. That's SCI. That means that you're probably going to be a top secret document that is compartmentalized. That's a really big deal.
Now, back on the note of Trump and the comparison, we know that Trump was accused of improperly handling classified documents. His residence at Mar-a-Lago was raided by the FBI. I mean, can we expect similar actions against Biden with all this?
Well, from what we understand, it was President Biden's attorneys that found these documents and turned them over to the Department of Justice. And my question for the Department of Justice is, what were the classification or what was the security clearance of these attorneys? And is the Department of Justice going to execute a raid on the Penn Biden Center to ensure that they got all the documents that are actually there? How do we know that? How do we know that all the documents were actually turned over? Earlier last year, NARA said that all of the Obama-Biden administration's classified documents had been turned over. Well, obviously, we know that statement is now false. So what else is out there? We need to know that, too. And then the second thing is, how is President Biden, how is he potentially compromised by these documents? The Penn Biden Center, when it opened in 2018, had a significant anonymous donation, over $15 million by the Chinese, from the Chinese, who in China gave over $15 million to the Penn Biden Center. And what did they get for it? Those are critical questions that need to be answered. And the Oversight Committee, I think, is going to investigate that. We've already sent a letter to NARA to get their side of the information. And we're going to see what the Justice Department and the executive has to say as well.
Yeah, well, important questions to answer. And I know there's some who say, on the note of justice, that there's a two-tiered system of justice in this country. If you're a Republican, they tend to go after you pretty strongly, even if it's just like a perceived offense. If you're a Democrat, it seems you can get away with just about anything. Biden and members of his family have been accused of several crimes. Do you think we're going to see them held accountable? For a lot of Americans, they see things like this and like, well, is there anything going to be done about it? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, we have one set of laws, we have one justice system, and we are all equal under the law. And that's the way it has to be, or we don't really have a constitutional republic. That we cannot have a two-tiered system of justice, and we have to make sure that where one exists, and I'm not going to say if one exists, we know one exists, but where one exists, it is exposed and it is destroyed. Because we have one system of justice for every solitary person. We are all equal, whether you are President of the United States, or Vice President of the United States, or Joe Citizen. That's the way our country works, and we must hold to that. And it's Congress's responsibility to ensure that that happens.
Well, and on that note of Congress, Republicans are now in control of the House. They promised to hold these investigations into a lot of areas. What role do investigations play with this? Like, why are these important? I know you can't technically charge people, but why is the investigations, why are these important?
Oh, they're tremendously important because we are a government that is transparent to our people. It's not the people work for the government, it's the government work for the people. Therefore, what the government does has to be transparent to the people. They elect us and we serve them. So therefore, what we do has to be available for them to see. And that's why it is so critically important that what you're seeing here, these classified documents found in the closet of Vice President Biden's office in the Penn Biden Center, which he used for 3 years. It's so important to figure out what impact these documents had on President Biden, and then also let our country know, is the President Biden, is he potentially compromised?
Well, it's pretty serious questions. I guess, Congressman, just 20 seconds. If you tell the American people one thing on actually trying to hold these people accountable, what do you tell them?
Well, I'll tell you, the Republican majority made that promise. The last pillar in our commitment to America was a government that's accountable, and we are going to do that. I promise you we will do that, and I will be part of that, and I look forward to exposing the corruption within the Biden crime family and the rest of the administration as well to the American people.
Hey, Congressman, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, we're joined by constitutional attorney and former senior counsel to President Trump, Jenna Ellis. She's here to discuss the latest revelations about President Biden's improperly storing of these classified documents. You don't want to miss it.
Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
NTD's Capitol Report. It's about getting answers, cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American? Congressman Graves, thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you're in the know.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. NTD Business. I'm Paul.
At The Nation Speaks, we don't just scratch the surface. We want to go wide and deep. Our viewers come away with a much richer understanding of the issues of the day. We really make a big effort to bring on different voices onto the show. We don't just talk to experts and newsmakers, which of course are extremely important, but we also want to hear from the American people. So the people who are impacted by the policies and issues that we're talking about, because what they have to say is just as important to the national conversation.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
As we've been discussing, a few months ago, the Biden administration made headlines when it took the unprecedented step of using the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago over President Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents. Now, classified documents are making headlines again, but Trump isn't at the center. Instead, it's none other than President Biden himself. The alleged crime? Improperly storing classified materials. Now, we're hearing that U.S. intelligence materials related to Ukraine, Iran, and the UK were found in President Biden's private office when he was VP. And these documents, again, were from when he was vice president under Obama. I mean, he didn't have the protection of the office of president at that time. The House Oversight Committee's response? An investigation. Sounds familiar, right? Only this time, instead of Democrats in charge, it's Republicans. But is there an element of hypocrisy in all this? Republicans were quick to defend Trump, and Democrats were also quick to find him guilty. Are Republicans now guilty of rushing on judgment against Biden? And are Democrats guilty of assuming Biden is being innocent? Joining us to discuss all of this is Epoch Times contributor and also constitutional law attorney Jenna Ellis. Jenna is also former senior advisor and counsel to President Trump. Hey, Jenna, thanks for being here with us.
Great to join you. Thank you.
Now, many people are seeing parallels to President Trump having classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. There's a fundamental difference in all this. When Trump, again, was accused of this, he was president when he took the documents into his possession. Biden was vice president. And, first off, explain to us the difference between these two situations legally. Like, what does that mean?
Right. Well, all executive authority, according to the U.S. Constitution in Article 2, Section 1, is vested in a president of the United States. However, the president does delegate some of his authority under agency capacity to other members of the executive branch, including the vice president. And so here the legal question is not just solely that the president can declassify, but whether or not the vice president, in this instance it would have been Joe Biden, was exercising proper authority and process in declassification. And so for the Republicans that are quick to suggest that only a president has the authority to declassify, that's not genuinely the legal situation. There are a lot of other executive agents that do have declassification authority.
Well, that's important to note. And, another point too, Biden's accused of improperly storing these classified documents. A lot of people, I think, are pointing to this because of the hypocrisy. He accused Trump of a crime with this. Is this just politics at play? Is it optics? I mean, was it a crime? Like, how do you view this?
Right. Well, unfortunately, when the media and politicians are looking at an instance, they typically will play political optics and political theater and answer the political questions instead of the legal and constitutional questions. And so for this instance of declassification authority or proper storage or custodial disputes, the Democrats were rushing to judgment with President Trump, and now they're trying to defend Joe Biden, where the exact inverse is happening, of course, with Republicans with regard to President Trump and Joe Biden. So I think that we have to first answer the legal questions and answer them properly, whether or not we're supporters of President Trump or Joe Biden, and then everyone has to abide by the rule of law.
Yeah, that's an important point too. The other thing to mention, of course, is under American law, you're innocent till proven guilty. We don't have the Napoleonic system, right? That right seems to have been really suspended with Trump in particular, with Democrats. The big question I think we have is, are Republicans kind of making the same mistake by assuming guilt? And I understand where they're at. How do you play this game politically? There was hypocrisy involved. How do they make a big deal about it and make sure things are essentially, the hypocrisy is exposed while not kind of falling in the same mistake, I guess we could call it?
Right. Well, exactly. Instead of presuming guilt, we need to presume hypocrisy, because that's what we have proof of. And that's exactly what the Democrats are guilty of. And we as conservatives and as Republicans shouldn't be guilty of the same thing. And so this is why we have to answer the legal questions before we answer the political questions. And again, if you look at MSNBC or CNN, you're going to see distinguishments between Trump and Biden. And then if you look at the more conservative leaning outlets, you're going to see see, well, if Biden is guilty, then, they were calling for this investigation. Where are the raids? Where are all of these things? Well, that's the question, is why the disparate treatment here? Why the minimizing by Democrats and also the DOJ and the FBI here? If they thought that it was proper and appropriate to go and raid a former sitting president's residence, why aren't we seeing the same treatment of Joe Biden? I think that's a legitimate question.
Well, and on that point, too, that brings up something really important, which is the Department of Justice and its role in all this. I know the DOJ at least claims they're investigating Biden right now, but if they choose not to go after Biden to the same degree they went after Trump, do you think that will kind of expose a dual system of law? There's supposed to be equal, kind of equal application of law. What will this show us?
I think that will show an evidence, a conflict of interest, and an ethical appearance of bias on behalf of the DOJ and specifically Attorney General Merrick Garland. He should properly appoint a special counsel and an independent arbiter, which is exactly what Team Trump requested during the aftermath of the Mar-a-Lago raid. And the Democrats and even the DOJ fought that special master appointment, but now they find themselves in the same situation that calls for an independent judgment. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Merrick Garland does here, because he is between a rock and a hard place. He is going to have to treat Joe Biden the exact same way that he treated Donald Trump. And this is why, if you're the sitting attorney general, you don't want to persecute your political opponents, because it will then turn on you when you have to go after someone you actually serve at the pleasure of. So he would be very wise in this instance to tread carefully.
And just the last question on this, that we're watching Republicans now in charge of the House of Representatives. They can launch their own investigative committees. They are looking into this. If you were to give them recommendations on how to conduct kind of a fair and impartial investigation, not repeat some of these same mistakes, what would that look like?
Well, I think that they should pursue the legal questions rather than the political theater. That's exactly what they were calling for during January 6th committee investigations, and they should put Democrats on those select committees if there are investigations of Joe Biden, so that they are not guilty of perpetuating the same things they were criticizing of the Democrats. They also need to ask and answer the fact-finding questions and the legal questions, and specifically regarding Joe Biden's documents. Reports have come out that these documents contain classified information related to Ukraine and China. The Republicans have just launched a bipartisan special committee on holding China accountable. Whether or not these classified documents had anything to do with Biden's relationship with China, those are perfectly appropriate questions. But make sure it's all about the rule of law and the Constitution, not the partisan politicking.
That's important stuff. Thank you again for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, folks, coming up after the break, we speak to several Republican congressmen for a deep dive into what went down in the battle for the House Speaker, and also how it has shaken up and changed the GOP. Now, first up, we're joined by Congressman Tim Walberg, who supported Kevin McCarthy's speakership bid from the start. Find out why after the break. Hey, welcome back. The House of Representatives voted in Kevin McCarthy as the new Speaker of the House on January 7th, following what looked like a break within the Republican Party. Now, 20 Republican members of the House refused to vote with the others. Most of them pushed for Representative Jim Jordan instead. During the deadlock, Representative Matt Gaetz even voted to make former President Donald Trump the House Speaker, and Donald Trump himself also joined the fray with an unexpected move of backing McCarthy as well. Now, it was only after 15 rounds of deadlocked votes the Republicans came together and agreed to a set of new rules. Among those would be the restoration of key rules that some members argue are needed to maintain the integrity of government. Now, this included the ability of a single House member to initiate a vote to remove a House Speaker, a rule to give members of Congress 72 hours to review bills before voting, and rules to prevent hidden bills from going through while being packaged within other bills. Now, common sense things in a lot of people's eyes, but those were changed over the course of the last few years. After being elected as House Speaker, McCarthy has kept his side of the deal. These changes have now been made. And also now, as tensions subside, Americans are seeing what appears to have taken place. The so-called uniparty of establishment Republicans and Democrats has now been disrupted, and the Freedom Caucus, the MAGA Republicans, have now become an essential part of the Republican Party, integrated within it now. Some Democrats are framing this as the Republican Party embracing what they say is a more extreme side of the party. Republicans, on the other hand, are now talking about unity within the party, a willingness to see different viewpoints and come together despite those. Now, what's certain is that the shift represents a fundamental change in American politics. Now, what has really changed? Was this the real intention all along? What does this really mean for American politics? To answer these questions, we'll be speaking with several members of Congress tonight, including many who initially actually voted to block McCarthy, some of whom changed their minds afterwards. Our first guest on this is Congressman Tim Walberg. And again, from the beginning, Congressman Walberg supported McCarthy's speaker bid, but he also wasn't shy about wanting his conference to come together, elect McCarthy, and get to work for the American people. Hey, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
Now, you've served 8 terms in Congress. You've worked with Kevin McCarthy for years. Why did you support him for Speaker despite kind of the opposition and so on?
Yeah, well, I'm starting my 8th term in Congress. I came into Congress in 2006 class with Kevin McCarthy. And over the years, I've seen Kevin as a team player, wanting to move forward conservative agenda. He's truly a conservative, and get it done as a team and have the best operations going. As he ran for Speaker this time, he was the only one that had done all that was necessary to get the overwhelming majority of votes. He had 85% of the votes of those of us who voted in the primary back in November. And normally that makes our nominee the one who will put forward and we will vote into place. But there were several of them, ended up being 20. At first it was 31 who opposed Kevin, and then when we got to the votes on the floor, it ended up being 20. I think it ended up being a good thing for us. While there was only one major thing changed out of the entire rules package, and I know that there are people talking about significant changes, there was only one major change, and that was going from 5 people needed to abdicate the chair, call for a vote to abdicate the chair and vacate it, down to 1. So now only 1 member of Congress can step up and call for a vote to vacate the Speaker of the House's chair. That was the only change. But I think what went on in that process was the opportunity for members, the 20 specifically, to say, listen, let's make sure that's in writing, that all of that's for sure. Even the rest of the rules package is absolutely certain, and you will sign the dotted line, which Kevin McCarthy did. And ultimately, when you saw, I think it was the ninth or 10th vote, that two of the main leaders of the 20, that being Representative Chip Roy, and Scott Perry, agreed to it, and then it began to fall. And I think, had we just taken the 11th or 12th vote and said, you know, the writing's on the wall, I think we'd have moved forward without some of the acrimony. I know a number went home very angry early Saturday morning that we had gone through all of this. But in the end, I think over the weekend, myself included, we began to get excited that we went through this process of working together, even in a bit of a contest, and we came through strong. And I saw in our conference meeting yesterday morning what might have been expected to be a rather rambunctious debate and bloodletting in conference. It wasn't. We talked about issues the whole time and moving forward. And then our votes that took place on Monday night, Tuesday, and today have shown that we're keeping our commitment to America, and we're moving it together.
Well, it's interesting. I'm curious on kind of your own thinking on how you view this. You said initially maybe you were a little bothered. Other members were bothered by it. You said you see it as kind of a good thing. I know that from the outside looking at it, I talked to a lot of Americans, and a lot of them tend to not like maybe not like the fact that there's not more disagreement among members of the House and Congress. And sometimes debate like this, they see it as being kind of healthy in some ways. Do you share that view? And I guess, how do you view this now looking back on it? What does this mean for Republicans?
No, Jess, that's very insightful. I see that. I know I got a lot of calls from people who said this is looking stupid for the Republicans. You know, why can't you get together? Well, we're not Democrats. We're not lemmings. We don't go over the cliff together. We have ideas and we represent districts. I don't represent Congress. I'm a representative. Some people call me a congressman, but I'm a representative of 750,000 or more people in the 5th District of Michigan. And so the debate was good. What was frustrating was that as we labored on and on, there was one member who lost his mother, died while we were voting. He couldn't go home and spend time with his family till this vote was taken because we needed the votes. And he sacrificed being home right away with this tragic happening. We had a member whose wife gave birth prematurely, and then all of a sudden the baby took a turn for the worst. He flew home. Thankfully, the baby is now doing fine, and he was able to fly back for the final votes. And there were other members like that that had challenges. And so that, I think, is what made some of us angry as we went on the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th vote, with at least one person saying he would give the vote on Monday, but he wouldn't give it that early morning on Saturday. And I think ultimately, I think President Trump called and said, let's get with it. And we came together and we got it passed. So that's why I say I went away a bit frustrated that some members at the very end put people through very difficult settings. But I think in the end, I'm excited about the fact that we survived that. We had a full debate. We had a family battle in some ways, but we came through, I think, stronger. And if this is the battle we'll have at the very first, maybe we got it out of the way and we can move forward with the rules that we have in place that I think will give us the ability to look at the Senate on some key votes, including spending bills, and say, we have been through the fire, we're standing together. We're not going to be pushed around by you like you did before this vote was taken and giving us an omni package of $1.7 trillion, and then you left town and jammed us with it. That's wrong, and we're not going to accept that. So in the end, I'm kind of excited that we survived it, and I think we'll come out stronger.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for being here sharing this with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, joining us after the break is Congressman Andy Biggs, and Representative Biggs actually opposed electing Kevin McCarthy as Speaker, a position he held to the bitter end, and he's here to explain why that happened, why he took that position after the break.
The lasting beauty of realistic oil painting. Brilliant, expressive, and inspirational. The 6th NTD International Figure Painting Competition. Guided by pure authenticity, beauty, and goodness. Invites you to join us on a journey back to traditional art. The Gold Award is $10,000. For more details, please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
As we've been discussing, the battle for House Speaker is over. Now, after 15 rounds of voting, holdout Republicans made a deal and allowed McCarthy to take the position. What went on really, though, behind closed doors, and how is this changing the GOP from within? We're going to hear from Congressman Andy Biggs on this. He helped lead the opposition to McCarthy and was also among the few who, to the very end, actually refused to vote for McCarthy. Hey, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, you weren't shy about wanting, saying what you would want in a House Speaker. You said you want someone who would change the status quo and advance America First principles. And even during the last round of voting, you refused to vote for McCarthy. Why was that?
Well, we knew that on Monday, so this has happening like in the late hours on Friday, early hours of Saturday morning. We knew that Mr. McCarthy had secured the votes on Monday. He was going to get the votes. It was now time to just basically say, okay, he's got the votes. Let's be gracious about this, if we can salvage graciousness, and go out. The 6 of us had been together as a team since day one 2 months ago, and let's just go out and let's give him that. We'll vote present, and we'll trust that all the changes that have been made will be honored, and we'll actually have fostered, hopefully, some kind of long-lasting change to make this place better, make the country better.
Yeah, well, you mentioned these changes you agreed to. These were the concessions, right? Now, do you believe that these concessions are going to kind of uphold the principles that you agreed to in terms of this kind of new party that has integrated itself into the Republican Party?
Well, I hope so. I mean, just to go over a few quick things, I think most people are baffled when they hear that we get a 4,000-page bill and they give it to us and say, you got 2 hours to read this, we're going to vote on it, and it has everything under the sun. So we reinstituted the 72-hour rule to read the bill, which is still, in my opinion, is not enough. And then, but it's a good start. And then you also have germaneness and single subjects. Those are a little bit getting into the weeds, but let's just put it to you this way: that should prevent somebody bringing a bill to the floor that deals with, let's say, building a freeway somewhere, and then they stick on giving $40 billion to Ukraine under that. So these are the types of things that really undermine a constitutional representation republic. So we got those changes in there, and then we got some stuff dealing with the budget, which hasn't been actually balanced in 25 years. So we're hoping to get something there too.
On that note, so far it looks like McCarthy's actually holding his side of the bargain, at least so far. Do you think this reflects on how he's going to be during his full term as Speaker?
Yeah, I'm viewing this. I'm giving him every opportunity. I'm viewing it as a clean slate for him, and forgetting, like a goldfish would, any past history that I've observed, and trusting that he's going to do it. And I'm going to support him every way I can to get this job done, so we get the best 2 years that we've had, certainly since I've been here.
Yeah, on another point, people were watching this whole debate. You had these holdout Republicans, yourself among them. Donald Trump came in and actually backed McCarthy. And a lot of, I think, Republican voters, those who like Trump and those who did not like McCarthy, was standing more behind you folks, were kind of wondering why Trump was doing that. And I think only after the smoke cleared were they like, oh, maybe that was kind of part of it? Explain to us what happened with this. What role did Trump play with this, and how does that fit in with the actions you and others took kind of standing against McCarthy initially?
Well, I'm not sure why President Trump came in for now Speaker McCarthy, but the reason that we did what we did is because we believe that this place is fundamentally broken, and if we're going to make a change, you only get that maybe once in a generation, truly once in a generation. You saw it with President Trump on the executive branch when he came in, was a great disruptor. But we didn't have the same kind of disruption in the House, and haven't had it since 1994 when Newt Gingrich came in with the Contract with America team. And so you've gone really almost 30 years, and the digression, the devolution of this institution has happened over that period of time. And so this is like, we have one shot at this. We may never get another shot at it. And let's do everything we can to make this the best place we possibly can, so that for at least the next 2 years, we can make some long-lasting, we can initiate some changes that might be long-lasting, but certainly we hope would go forward 2 years. So for us, it was damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. We have to do this, and we felt a stirring will to do that.
That's interesting. You said this is like a once-in-a-generation shift. A lot of people, I think, they note that it was interesting you guys kind of blocked it, but what did you achieve with this, and why is this like a once-in-a-generation shift? Well, because
over the last, including before Mr. Gingrich was Speaker, you've seen a centralization of power into the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the counterparts in the Senate, and under Pelosi it really became imperialized, so that we haven't had an open amendment process on the floor since I've been in Congress. You know, they used to have a chance where you go down and you offer an amendment, you have a debate. It can be a short debate, but you have a debate and you have a vote and you're done. We haven't done that at any time since I've been in Congress. Wow. So you need to open it up. That's the point, is to open it up and allow us to represent our constituents. And that's what we think we've at least, I hesitate to use this word, liberalized it a little bit more than it has been, so that, you know, you've got a germaneness rule, you've got a single subject rule, you've got stuff with appropriations, you've got a 72-hour rule, you have opportunities to amend bills, and Mr. McCarthy has said that he had promised some of our group that he would equalize the opportunities for members to serve on various committees, and it looks like he's going to keep that. I believe he's going to keep the promises he made.
Well, yeah, big changes. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up after the break, we have Congressman Andy Harris. And Congressman Harris initially opposed Kevin McCarthy for House Speaker, but actually changed his vote. We're going to find out why after the break.
Freedom is not free, and neither is the truth. In order to bring you the facts, our reporters are out there on the front lines getting the true story. Some of them served 10 years of prison in China. We've been censored on social media. Our Hong Kong printing offices were set on fire, and we've been repeatedly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party. But no matter what, we believe that you deserve the truth, and so we'll continue to bring the truth to light. Head on over to getepic.com and try honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
We're back with more on the battle for House Speaker. Now, the dust is settling, the House is in session, but a question still remains. One of the big ones is, well, looking for answers on these. We speak with Congressman Andy Harris about some of what we still want to know. Congressman Harris initially opposed Kevin McCarthy for House Speaker, but switched his vote actually later on into it, and here's what he had to say about that. Hey, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Certainly.
Now, you're on the committee that holds oversight to ensure tax dollars are being appropriately spent, something you believe has not been happening over the past few years. And, you know, initially you opposed McCarthy for Speaker, but agreed to support him only after he agreed to these concessions, one of which is an extended period to actually read the bills coming through Congress. Can you explain that?
Well, you know, in December, after Nancy Pelosi dropped that 4,400-page, $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill on our desks, expecting us to vote on it within a day with no amendments and only 2 hours of debate for $1.7 trillion, a group of us said this can't happen again. So that's when the negotiations began to come to an agreement to take away a little bit of the Speaker's power that wouldn't allow any Speaker to repeat what Nancy Pelosi did.
You know, seems like kind of reasonable in my opinion, but you know, you've been clear about wanting to return control of the House to the people. You just said that it's taken away some of the power of the House Speaker to some extent, and you're saying it's given some of that back to the people. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, we have 435 of us represented to, you know, each one represents about 750,000 people in this country. But if under the rules, the way they had existed, if you didn't sit on what we call a committee of jurisdiction, so a committee that discussed the bill, reported the bill, amended the bill, if you didn't sit on that committee, you didn't have a say in that bill. It would come through the Rules Committee to the floor, no amendments allowed on the floor. You would have no say. So that's not the way a representative should work. I should have the ability to have a say on any given bill. Now, I may not win my argument, but I should be able to make that argument on behalf of my constituents. And that's what these new rules, that's what they do.
You know, now just kind of from the outside looking in, it looks like the battle over the House Speaker seems to show that the establishment Republicans don't really hold the same sway they used to. Instead, it's like the new folks, right? The new blood, the Freedom Caucus, the America First movement. Now, why is that? And do you kind of see it this way?
No. The old line still has a lot of sway. They hold a lot of power. But at critical points, such as the Speaker vote, they depended on the votes of 218 Republicans, not just 185, not just the ones that supported Kevin in the initial vote. They depended on all of them. We knew that empowered us to, again, take down the Speaker's power a little bit. And again, any Speaker, whether it was Kevin, whether it was someone else, any Speaker, give them a little less power to allow individual members to have more power, which we think will make it less likely, for instance, to run trillion-dollar deficits. We think that this is the powers that be apparently don't mind spending $1 trillion more than we take in, printing that, leading to inflation. We think that we can keep that under control if we restore more of the power to regular members and take a little bit of power away from the leadership.
You know, just asking kind of, again, from the outside looking in, we see these multi-trillion-dollar spending packages coming through. We see them being sold to the American public as necessary for bailing us out of issues. But then we start reading the content of them, and we're like, why are we spending money on, like, gender programs in Pakistan or, like, fish programs when we're told it's for, like, bailing us out of a deficit? From the outside with Americans looking in, it looks like these things often don't have anything to do with what they claim they are, and we start wondering who they actually benefit. From your perspective, what is the nature of a lot of these spending bills? Like, what is the culture within the House that allowed these things to happen the way they've been done?
Sure. Look, there are a lot of special interests in this town, and those special interests all have an interest in usually adding spending to a bill. And the check and balance on that is to basically throw open the windows, let the sunshine in, and let's take a vote. I mean, if you want to spend tens of millions of dollars on securing Egypt's border, but not our border, great, let's have a vote on that. Let's see what the American people think about that. And again, to do that, you had to take away a little power from the Speaker. You had to say we can't have these big, huge bills coming to the floor, no chance to amend them, no chance to read them, up or down votes on the bill, take it or leave it. That's how you get that kind of runaway spending, out of control spending, special interest spending occurring in Washington.
You know, what seems like happened with this, of course, new House Speaker vote is that McCarthy did get the votes, but it looks like the Freedom Caucus, and again, this new blood, does at least have some sway now within the Republican Party. To what extent now would you say this changes that culture? To what extent would you say this kind of introduces a new way of working within the Republican Party?
Sure. Well, I will tell you that, the people who, for instance, resisted what we were doing for 3 days, I think they're going to have to explain to people, you think it's a bad idea that we should read a bill for 72 hours? Do you think it's a bad idea that we should bring spending under control? I think the fact that we have brought conservative principles to the forefront, and again, I call them common sense principles. The average person says, yeah, a bill should only deal with a single subject. Once you start dealing with multiple subjects in a bill or group different bills together, you make it much more likely that something passes that probably would never pass on its own.
And on the Democrat side, I know they're accusing Republicans of embracing extremism by kind of folding to some of this. What's your response to that?
Well, look, the first thing I always wonder is, the Democrats complained that we couldn't elect, a speaker. But in fact, if they had voted for Mr. McCarthy on the very first ballot, he would have been elected speaker. So, to set up the straw man of saying, well, the extremists are actually those ones who are asking for us to be able to read a bill for 72 hours or for a bill to be on a single subject. Most Americans don't think that's an extreme opinion. So once the negotiations occurred, the agreement was made, and it was made public what this agreement was. Most Americans are, yeah, I think that's probably well worth 3 days of what we went through.
Hey, Congressman, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next guest is freshman Congressman Andy Ogles, and Congressman Ogles is a member of the House Freedom Caucus. He had an interesting welcome to Congress. At first, he opposed Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. Afterwards, McCarthy agreed to specific rule changes. Ogles actually switched his vote. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, Tennessee just elected you to serve in the House, and one of your first experiences was this contentious House Speaker vote. Not only that, but you had some of what people called a heated discussion with McCarthy after one of the donors threatened to pull support if you don't back McCarthy. Can you explain what happened with that?
Well, and to be clear, it actually wasn't a donor that had ever supported me. It was not a donor that I had ever met. But we've cleared the air. There's no hard feelings there, because what I stood up for, with what the 20 stood up for, was a rules package that empowered rank and file members. And even McCarthy's own statement says, for too long, the power had rested within the Speaker's office. And now, as a member, I can offer an amendment. As a member, I have 72 hours to read a bill. Imagine that. I actually have 3 days to read the bill. There has to be germaneness when it comes to a piece of legislation, meaning that any amendment has to actually pertain to the legislation being offered. So these are a big deal as we move forward. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be excited about the new rules package.
Well, you said you're good now, and I think this is something important because, at least as far as I see it, politicians aren't supposed to just agree with each other all the time. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's the way it was set up. Just my hunch. Right. I think that also means you can, of course, be cordial with each other, but there's a difference between this. Can you explain your reasoning for kind of taking the position you did and willing to have that kind of uncomfortable encounter in order to uphold what you believe your constituents want?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you have to understand is the negotiations over the rules package has been taking place for months. And so this has been ongoing in good faith on both sides for many months. When I was elected and became a congressman-elect, I became a party to those negotiations as a conservative member of the Freedom Caucus, or soon-to-be member. And so what happened was we were negotiating. We hadn't finished the rules package. We hadn't come to a final agreement. And so we withheld our votes until we could finalize that rules package. And look, go back to John Quincy Adams. He was a congressman. He was a senator. He was a minister. Now we call them ambassadors. He was president of the United States. And after accomplishing all of that, he came back to the House of Representatives. Why? Because it was the people's house. It was the house where they argued. They disagreed. He called it the raucous chamber, and it was the chamber that it was most beloved to him. And so what you saw last week is what our founding fathers intended, that we would have healthy debate, that there would be arguments on the floor, if you will. But at the end of the day, iron sharpens iron, and what we're trying to achieve is the best outcome for the American people. I'm proud of the work that we did, and right now we're going through the process of selecting committees, and I look forward to getting that finalized so we can get back to the work of the people.
Well, and to that point, initially you did say you were not a McCarthy guy. Now you ended up switching to support him. What was the big shift for you? What made you change your mind with that?
Yeah, it was literally the rules package. And if you go back and if you watch the video, you know, that first call came out. I actually missed, you know, the first call within that vote series because I was meeting with leadership and we were talking about the finer points. I wanted clarity to make sure what the things that I was interested in, the ability to offer amendment on the floor, to limit spending as we move forward. Look, I'm an economist. The spending at the levels that we've been maintaining are unsustainable. So we have to get strategic in figuring out where can we cut. And at times it might be painful, but that's okay because we're in a recessionary period. We're in an inflationary period, and we've got to start doing something on behalf of the American people. So I rose, and once I knew that we had arrived at the place that I was comfortable with, I said, as an act of good faith, because we were still negotiating. As an act of good faith to my colleagues and to both sides who are negotiating, I vote for Kevin McCarthy. I stand by that vote. I stand by the rules package that we negotiated. And again, I'm excited as we move forward. And look, the government's out of control. You have 87,000 IRS agents. We don't have that many billionaires in that country, in this country. So you know what that means? That they're going to be auditing you. You have the FBI has been weaponized against the American people. We're going to put a stop to this nonsense. We're going to get rid of the wokeness, and we're going to get back to managing this country and fighting inflation.
Yeah, you know, one of the big things people noted that was agreed upon was this new rule that would allow any one member to remove the House Speaker, or at least start a vote if needed. And I mean, could you explain the thinking behind that? Because it does seem like if McCarthy doesn't play by kind of what he agreed to do, someone can initiate that and basically you're at square one again, and you know Republicans can basically block him. Tell us about what that means, really.
Yeah, great question. So when you look at the rule or the motion to vacate the Speaker, that's actually historic. It was only removed by Nancy Pelosi. So all we were doing is restoring historical motions back to the House floor. Because what we want to do as rank and file members is get back to the idea of regular order, meaning that you're going to offer amendments, meaning that you can vacate the chair of the Speaker. And keep in mind, that's only been done a few times in history. That's an option of last resort. You can offer the motion, but you still have to have the votes to vacate the Speaker's chair. And so, again, I don't think you're going to see that used. But what we were trying to restore is the historical operations of the House of Representatives, and that's what we've done.
Well, and that's important, too. Another big thing is a change in the Republican Party itself, because, I mean, I was watching the debates. I was seeing what people were writing about and putting on Twitter, and people were like, oh, these 20 Republicans holding it down, they're not going to accomplish. They said they're not going to accomplish anything, and, you know, they're not going to win the vote, but I think we're seeing now that maybe that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to make the Republican establishment recognize this change that has taken place within kind of the Republican voters, really. Do you see it that way? And what does this shift actually mean in terms of the kind of power structures within the Republican Party versus the kind of new MAGA movement that started?
Well, I mean, I think when you look at, you know, obviously everybody was watching C-SPAN, everybody was tuned into that and watching the proceedings live, which was great for the American people to witness civics, by the way. I mean, I wish more people were engaged in government like they were, you know, all the time like they were last week. That being said, when you look at the rules package that was presented by McCarthy on the House floor, it was overwhelmingly supported by the entire Republican caucus, except for one vote. And so if anyone questions his ability to lead, all you have to go to is look at that vote. Look at the legislation that we've been passing since that time, virtually unanimous, in some cases bipartisan. So I commend the Speaker for having a vision, for working with us on the rules package. And look, at this point, the House of Representatives is going to be doing the work of the people. And it's incumbent upon the U.S. Senate to do their job. Instead of just passing a $1.7 trillion omnibus on our heads, let's go govern and fix this economy that we know is broken. Let's secure the southern border, which we know is wide open. Look, when you have kids, college kids in South Dakota overdosing on fentanyl, look, every town in America is now a border town. And yet the Senate, and quite frankly, for the last couple of years, the House of Representatives has been sitting on their hands while our children have been victimized. I, for one, have had enough. I'm going to fight for change. That's what we've done in the past. That's what we're going to do going forward.
Hey, Congressman, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's a show for tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning in and being here with us. We'll be back next Wednesday with a brand new show. Until then, Good night.